This is Ian Cameron for Pub Sports Radio, and I am back with another NHL Play-In Series preview. Yesterday we looked at the Montreal Canadiens, Pittsburgh Penguins. We're going to stay in the Eastern Conference today. We're going to preview the matchup between the Carolina Hurricanes and the New York Rangers. Another Eastern Conference Play-In Series matchup taking place. Currently, series price, Carolina Hurricanes minus 140. Favorites in this series, the New York Rangers plus 120 in terms of being the underdog in this series. And when you look at these two teams and you look at the Carolina Hurricanes, we'll start with them. They're a team that obviously had a lot of playoff success last season. Of course, getting all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals, a bit of a Cinderella story, underdog type story really for Rod Brindamore's Carolina Hurricanes team. They basically were riding the coattails of the being the bunch of jerks. You know, that whole mantra and that whole scenario that unfolded following the comments made by Hockey Night in Canada at the time. Of course, he was later let go during that season for controversial comments, but Don Cherry making remarks about Carolina's post-game celebrations after victories on home ice, saying that's not the way you're supposed to conduct yourself, bunch of jerks. And he basically went off talking about how he didn't like what they were doing in terms of their post-game celebrations. Nevertheless, I think Carolina kind of used that to rally themselves to a hell of a season. And you got to give Brindamore credit. First year as the head coach, they were a team that employed this, good enough defensively, good enough defensive type of mindset, counterattack, and shoot the puck at every possible moment you can. If there's an opening, if there's an opportunity to shoot the puck and take a chance on net, take it. That's basically the way Carolina played last year. They were one of the top teams in terms of average shots on goal per game, and really it was based on playing the way Rod Brindamore wanted them to. Be aggressive, shoot from anywhere, look for traffic, rebounds in front of the net, try to score goals that way, rather than always trying to make the pretty pass, the pretty play, and the perfect play in the offensive zone. Carolina had a lot of injury concerns prior to the pandemic arriving in March and prior to the pause of the season. They had some key cogs out. Brett Pesce on defense was injured. They had recently picked up Sami Vatanen on the blue line. He hadn't played yet since they acquired him. That was definitely a concern for the Hurricanes. Dougie Hamilton had been out due to injury on the blue line. Well, the good news for the Carolina Hurricanes is they're going to have two of those three guys back. Looks like Sami Vatanen's finally healthy again and available to them to be one of their starting defensemen for this series against the Rangers, and Dougie Hamilton as well. And Hamilton's the big one. Hamilton's a player that plays in all situations for the Canes, power play, penalty kill, 5-on-5. Was really having a solid offensive season in terms of production offensively from the blue line as well for Carolina prior to his injury. So there's no doubt the Carolina Hurricanes are happy to have Dougie Hamilton back and healthy again. And the two goaltenders for the Carolina Hurricanes, Peter Mrazek and James Reimer. These are two goalies that were going through injury concerns, and both of them were injured at the same time for a couple of weeks, just prior to the pandemic, and they were forced to go to the AHL ranks, calling up Alex Nedeljkovic and Anton Forsberg to be the two goalies, as Mrazek and Reimer were injured at the same time. Both of them just barely got back into the lineup and cleared to play before the pandemic, but neither of them really got a lot of starts, and you worry a little bit, at least I do, for Carolina and their goaltending situation going into this series. You have Peter Mrazek and James Reimer, your top two goalies, that were both injured and out of the lineup for a period of time before the pandemic. They were just ready to get their feet wet again and get back into that rhythm and flow of being back in between the pipes, both of them returning from injury around the same time, and then all of a sudden the season gets paused because of COVID-19, and now the long layoff following that, and that now makes for an even longer and an even greater extended period of time for the Carolina goaltenders to be without game action, when you compare them to the other teams in the NHL that are getting set to resume their season. So, definitely worried about rhythm, definitely worried about being able to play at your highest level for both of these guys, Peter Mrazek and James Reimer, going into this series. As far as the New York Rangers are concerned, they're going to be definitely, I'm sure they were a little bit disappointed and frustrated that the season was paused when it was, because the New York Rangers were coming on strong. To the point where they got themselves right back into the playoff race in the Eastern Conference. They had an 11-6 stretch in the last 17 games prior to the season getting paused, and clearly the strength all year for the New York Rangers, and what's carried them to any success they've had, it's the offense. They've been able to score goals. That hasn't been the problem. The New York Rangers are ranked in the top 5 in the NHL in terms of offense, averaging 3.3 goals scored per game. And that group, which is very talented, this is a good forward group for the New York Rangers when you look at who they can put out on the ice and who's been able to score goals and find the back of the net for them. Mika Zibanejad has had an unbelievable season for the New York Rangers. Pavel Buchnevich has played well for them. Ryan Strome's had a resurgent season. You know, a lot of disappointment for a former first-round pick that hasn't necessarily panned out in his career, but he's had a nice bounce-back season. Artemi Panarin was the big off-season acquisition from Columbus for this Rangers team, and he has lived up to the billing and been an offensive difference maker for the Rangers. Elite level talent and skill possessed by Artemi Panarin. And Chris Kreider, we have to mention him because he's also one of the top forwards on this team, but he was out with a foot injury right before the pandemic. He is now healthy. He's back from the foot injury. He's ready to go. He'll be in the lineup, and that is a guy that's put up 45 points in 63 games played this season for the Rangers. So it makes an already pretty solid forward group even more dangerous and even more explosive that Chris Kreider is going to be able to play. Defensively, that's where the issues were for the New York Rangers. They certainly had trouble in their own zone, protecting the front of the net, getting pucks out of the zone. Turnovers and giveaways had plagued this team a lot throughout the course of the season. And quite frankly, they weren't getting enough saves from their goaltender, who early in the season it was Henrik Lundqvist. And I think David Quinn, look, Henrik Lundqvist had a great career. He's had a phenomenal run with the New York Rangers, a decade plus of just, elite level goaltending from him. But I think David Quinn, the head coach of the Rangers, he saw the writing on the wall that, Henrik Lundqvist is on the downward slope of his career. There's nowhere to go but down for him right now. He has shown real signs of a major decline in his play the last couple seasons. And the New York Rangers have not one bit shied away from giving their two young goalies more starts and more opportunity to be the number one goalie for this team, talking about Alexander Georgiev and even more specifically Igor Shesterkin. And this is a guy that you're going to want to remember his name. He is by far probably the best, highest ceiling goaltending prospect that the New York Rangers have. A lot of people talking about Igor Shesterkin as the goalie of the future for the Blue Shirts. And wow, did he ever play well since getting the call up and getting his first NHL starts. He made 12 starts for the Rangers, 10-2 in his 12 starts, 2.52 goals against average, 932 save percentage. The Rangers are making it sound like they're leaving this decision as to who their starting goalie will be for the series against Carolina up for a open competition here during training camp. But I would be absolutely stunned if it's not Igor Shesterkin. I think he's earned it. He's healthy. He was 10-2 as a starter. I think deep down inside that the Rangers are going to end up turning to him as the goalie. Carolina certainly has impressed a lot of analytical type handicappers and bettors with their strong advanced stats, their puck possession numbers, Corsi numbers. All of that look very good. But the one thing that hasn't looked good for Carolina is how have they done head-to-head against New York in recent seasons? That hasn't been good for Carolina, not at all. The New York Rangers have owned this head-to-head series. They've gone 41-14 in the last 55 meetings. And most importantly, the Rangers this past regular season, perfect 4-0 head-to-head against the Carolina Hurricanes. They've matched up well with this team for whatever reason. This has been a team that the New York Rangers have had a ton of success against. And when you look at the Rangers, their offense is very dangerous. Not that Carolina's isn't. Carolina, we know, can put the puck in the net as well. In terms of their forwards, we've got Svechnikov, Sebastian Aho, Teuvo Teravainen is a very good top line for them. I think there's a little bit more of a drop-off to their bottom lines, bottom six forwards. New York Rangers can really come at you in waves offensively. Definitely you got to give the defensive edge in this series probably to Carolina. They do have the better, deeper blue line. Goaltending, though, look, Mrazek's pretty good, but sometimes can go erratic at times. Reimer, much of the same. I would honestly go with Igor Shesterkin, either one of them, because he was just magnificent for the Rangers in net. And the New York Rangers, again, 11-6 before the break in their last 17 games before the season was paused. They matched up very well head-to-head against Carolina this year. They've got the goal-scoring punch to be dangerous. They're finally getting quality goaltending from specifically Igor Shesterkin. Again, 10-2 as a starting goalie for the New York Rangers. I think there's reasons to like New York in this series. In fact, I bet them plus 120 series price here against the Carolina Hurricanes. I think they're live in this series. Just in general, I'm more inclined to take plus prices with the dogs with these series prices than lay significant wood, significant chalk with the favorites, especially with the unpredictable, wide open nature I think we're going to see with the return to play for the NHL and these play-in series. I think New York's got a chance to knock off Carolina here in this series. And if you're talking from a future standpoint, New York Rangers are currently around plus 4,000, 40-1 to win the Stanley Cup. I think putting a couple of bucks on that wouldn't be a terrible idea either. This is a team that if they can get past Carolina, maybe they can be a threat and put some fear into a Boston or Tampa Bay or Washington or Philadelphia in the next round of the playoffs. So again, I think the New York, and again with Chris Kreider back, they're about as healthy as they've been all season. There's reasons to like the New York Rangers here in this series, and I would recommend looking toward New York here, plus 120 in the series price against Carolina, and also 40-1 shot on the New York Rangers to win the Stanley Cup. I don't think that is the worst idea in the world either. So I think New York's got a chance in what should be a very competitive series between the Carolina Hurricanes and the New York Rangers. So that's my series preview of Carolina and New York. Thank you for tuning in. I'll be back with you right here at Pub Sports Radio tomorrow for another NHL play-in series preview. And as always, reminder, check out pubsportsradio.com on a daily basis for great sports betting content. I'm Ian Cameron. We'll see you again tomorrow for another NHL series preview video.